Formulas are used to determine the content of a cell based on information that is primarily external to the cell. Formulas can range from arithmetic equations to text manipulating functions. When entering a cell, if we start with an equal sign, it will be taken as a formula. In addition to basic arithmetic operations, Excel provides an extensive library of functions to use in formulas. To get an idea how formulas work, let's start with some basic arithmetic. The most basic formula would probably be to be equals and then give it a number. So if we say equals to 43, it sets the value to 43, which is not much use because we could just type the number 43. The next simplest is to add a simple arithmetic operator. So let's say we could go equals 3 plus 5, and we end up with 8. Again, that formula wouldn't be of much use because the 3 and the 5 are hard-coded into the equation, and that cell can't be anything but 8. So you'd be better off to just put an 8 in. Formulas only start to become useful when they incorporate information external to the cell. For example, if we wanted to add the two cells we've just filled in, select a different cell, type equals, and then add the two cells. We can reference a cell by its letter and its number. So if we say equals A1 plus A2, we get the value. When entering a formula, we can click on a cell instead of typing its address manually. So say I wanted to add all three of these now. I could go equals, click on the first one, put a plus sign, click on the next one, put a plus sign, and click on the next one and hit enter. Adding a range of cells is quite common, and Excel has included functions that make that much quicker. There are multiple ways to access a function. We could start by typing equals. This pops up here left of the function bar. We click on that drop down and scroll down and find the function we're looking for. Or click more functions to get a menu. Alternatively, without having to type the equals, we could go to the Formula tab and pick one out of these menus here. Because the sum function is so common, Excel has included a button dedicated to auto sum, which will make an intelligent estimate of what cells you want to sum up. So in our case, if we position our cursor down here, it's going to make the guess that we want to sum cells 1 to 4. If we click the auto sum button, it fills out our equation equals sum A1 through A4. If we enter, we get the sum that we're looking for. Under the auto sum is a drop down that gives us some more of our very common operators. So for example, again, it guesses the range of cells that we want to average, and in this case, it guessed correctly. What if we want to do the same operation on a range of cells? For example, what if we wanted to multiply this whole column by a given number and place the results in the next column? We could start by filling in our first equations. Let's say equals cell A1 multiplied by a number, let's say 3. And then to do the same operation on the rest of the rows, select the cell that we manually filled in, click on the bottom right corner, and drag down as many rows as is applicable. Let's extend this example to allow us to put our multiplier into an external cell. So let's add a couple rows above. And let's do the same thing, except for instead of multiplying by a fixed number, we're going to multiply by the content of this cell. So let's go equals A3 times B1. Before we fill in the rest of the cells, let's have a look at a few things here. So if we notice here, first thing to notice is remember when we first added this formula, it was A1. When we inserted these two rows, it intelligently moved this to A3 so that it's now pointing at the same cell even though the cell has changed addresses. Also notice that as we go down, when we drug down, it incremented the cell numbers as we go down the row. which is what we want to do for these numbers. But we want every row to point at this same multiplier. If we want a row or a column in address to remain constant as we extend it to a range, we can add a $sign to whichever portion of the address that we want to remain constant. So in this equation, we're going to be dragging down so the column would not be changing. So in our example, we need our row to remain constant. And the rows are represented by the number. So if I put a $sign in front of the 1, and now drag it down, all of these cells are getting multiplied by 5. And if we change the number here, all of these cells get updated. Now to demonstrate the column portion of the addresses, let's say we drag down, move this over. They all go to 0 because now they're all pointing to C1 instead of B1. We could put a number in B1 or in C1. But what if we wanted this to again be multiplied by the same number as here? If we put a $sign again in front of the B, drag down, and then drag to the right. Now all of these cells in the second part of the formula is pointing back here at the same cell. Formulas can also quite often be textual. One common scenario is when we need to combine text from 2 or more cells. So if we just wanted to put those two cells together, there's a function called concatenate, and we can get to that in multiple ways again. We could click on the text drop down, and we can use concat, which is short for concatenate. When we choose our functions from the menu, we get a dialog box that asks us for the variables to use in the function. So in this case, we can click on the address for hello, then address 2 is Joe, and then hit enter, and we get hello Joe. Concat also takes a range of cells if we want. Whenever you start typing a formula, when a function pops up, you can click tab to complete the name of the function and the opening bracket for the variables. So in this case, let's look, what if we try to combine all of these? We get them all squished together as these words make a sentence. There's also a function that allows us to put a separator between all the words, and it is text join. So if we want a space between all of these, we can make a string with a space using quotation marks. Ignore empty. If we say ignore empty, it's going to ignore any empty cells. And then pick our range. And hit enter. Now we have these words make a sentence. What if we want some punctuation? Then we could go into here and modify our range to F. But notice that we still have a space. We can compound functions. Let's say we want to eliminate the space before the punctuation in our sentence. We could use a concat function and a text join function. We will concatenate the cell with our punctuation in it with the result of a text join containing all our words. Let's go equals concat, and the first portion will be our text join, first with our space, then all of our words, and then we'll concatenate the cell with our punctuation in it. Another vary function is an if statement, which when used will give one result if a statement is true and another if it is false. As an example, let's check if cells in column A are empty and output no name if the cell is empty, and hello, my name is blank if it is not. So we can go equals if. The logical test is if this cell is equal to an empty string. The value if it is an empty string, no name, the value if it is false. Let's concatenate a string of hello, my name is with the name. Whenever you hit enter on a formula and haven't closed all of your brackets, Excel will give you a warning and ask if you want it to automatically close them for you. So now we see anywhere there was a name, we get hello, my name is Joe, Frank, Fred. Anywhere there was no name, we get no name. Let's look at one more common and very useful function called VLOOKUP, based on a searched value in the first column. So let's make an example of a list of people that maybe owe us money. It's a simple table with a name, an ID, and how much they owe. So let's say we have a cell for a name where we're going to enter the name that we want to find. Let's just start with Joe. And then a cell for their ID and how much they're owing. And we want to fill these in automatically when we search for their name. And we can use VLOOKUP to accomplish that. So we'll go equals VLOOKUP. The lookup value is the value that we want to search for. So the name here. The table array is the array that we want to search in, and that's all of this here. The column index is which column we want to retrieve information from. So the ID column is column 2. And then the range lookup if we want to only have absolute values. So let's put in false so that we only get absolute values. So we can see it found Joe's ID. So we do basically the same thing. We look for Joe. And here, this time we're going to go with column 3. False again. And we get how much he owes again. We can change that to currency. And every time we change that, but what happens if we put in a name that doesn't exist? We get these hashtag NAs. Excel has included a function that is if_NA, which allows you to set a value if you get this error. So let's wrap an if_NA. And just as a note, function names are not case sensitive. So if you type them in and you leave them lowercase, Excel will adjust that for you automatically. So we can say if_NA. So we're saying if the result of this is NA, we could tell it to print invalid name. Otherwise, print the result of the function. We can do the same thing here. If NA. And then when we put another valid name in, we get the proper values again. That's a short rundown of formulas and a few of the functions available in Excel. To find out more about other function, you can always go through and look in the categories. And if you hover over one of them, it pops up a short explanation of what that function does.